They say that comparison is the thief of joy, but I say they don't know what they're talking about, because it's with great joy that I'm about to compare two of the most well-known guitar brands, Gibson and Epiphone. Which is better? You might think you already know the answer, but you don't. Just because you own one or the other doesn't make it better. It just makes you biased. But since I don't currently own any Gibson or Epiphone guitars, I'm not biased at all and can give you a 100% honest breakdown of how they stack up against each other in this head-to-head comparison. Number 1, headstock. What better place to start a head-to-head comparison than by comparing headstocks? As you can see, the heads of Gibson and Epiphone guitars are totally different. Don't let the fact that they're the exact same shape, size, and color fool you. They're completely different, because only one of them says Gibson on it. This is by far the biggest difference between Gibson and Epiphone guitars. One of them has Gibson written on the headstock, and the other one doesn't. It's because of that little magic 6-letter word that Gibsons easily win this category. As far as recognizability goes, Gibson is right up there with Fender. Everybody knows the name Gibson. It's a household name like Debbie Gibson was in the 80s, but ain't nobody ever been talking about no Debbie Epiphone. If Gibson guitars didn't say Gibson on the headstock, 9 out of 10 guitarists wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them and Epiphones. But they do say Gibson, which might not make them better instruments, but it sure makes them more expensive. Number 2, price. If you're in the market for a decent but unreasonably priced guitar, Gibson is the way to go. Few brands offer you the privilege of paying twice a guitar's value when plenty of similar models are available at a fraction of the price. For every expensive, overpriced Gibson model out there, Epiphone has a nearly identical guitar that costs half as much. So if they're nearly identical, why do Gibsons cost twice the price? Is it because they're made in the United States at a high-grade tone wood and contain premium hardware? That's what the folks at Gibson would like you to believe. But all that stuff only accounts for a tiny fraction of the price difference. You won't find the real reason why people pay twice as much for a Gibson guitar inside its indestructible case. You'll find it coming out of their unshut-upable face. When you buy a Gibson, you're not just buying a guitar. You're buying the right to brag about that guitar to all your non-Gibson playing friends. That's why most Gibson models cost twice as much as their identical Epiphone counterparts. It's also why Epiphone wins this category easily. They're much more affordable for the average guitarist. Epiphone owners might not get to brag about having a Gibson, but they can brag about still having 2 kidneys because they didn't need to sell one to buy their overpriced guitar. Number 3, perception. Perceiving is believing. And most guitarists believe that Gibsons are far superior to Epiphones even if they've never played either. That happens to be the public perception as well. Most non-musicians perceive Gibson to be the better of the 2 brands. If nothing else, maybe it's because they've actually heard of Gibson. Maybe it's because they know Gibson guitars cost a fortune, or because their favorite rock star plays one. But the reason really doesn't matter. The actual truth doesn't even matter. Regardless of which is actually better, Gibson guitars are perceived to be better instruments than Epiphones. Remember, perceiving is believing. And since Gibson is perceived to be the better brand, you'd better believe they win this category. But while it's generally perceived that Gibson guitars are better than Epiphones, the public perception of their owners is the exact opposite. Number 4, owners. While you may have some friends who own Epiphone guitars you don't know about, I guarantee you're perfectly aware of every single friend who owns a Gibson. That's because Gibson owners constantly feel the need to talk about their name brand guitar every chance they get. Now, me personally, I wouldn't brag about being a sucker who overpaid for his instrument. But for Gibson owners, the heavy price tag is a point of pride. These insufferable assholes somehow manage to work into every single conversation, A, that they own a Gibson, B, how much they paid for it, and perhaps most annoying of all, C, that you don't own a Gibson. It doesn't matter that you can totally own them on the guitar, shredding circles around them, because the conversation is always going to circle back to the fact that they own a Gibson and you don't. But what Gibson owners don't own that Epiphone owners do is this category. Sure, there are cocky jerks who play Epiphones just like any other brand, but by and large, Epiphone players are 1,000 times more humble and 1,000,000 times less annoying than people who own Gibsons. Do you want to stick it to those snobby Gibson players and show off your love of your Epiphone with a comfortable, stylish, and affordable t-shirt like this one? How about one of these? You can find shirts, mugs, stickers, and all sorts of other funny music-related merch at MusicBSharp.com. Whether you're looking for a gift to give a music-loving friend, or you just want something for yourself you can use to make that friend jealous, at MusicBSharp.com you'll find what you're looking for. MusicBSharp.com. Number 5, coolness. This category is kind of interesting because it's changed with time. 30 years ago, Gibson would have won a coolness competition all day. But now, not so much. While it's true, as we established in number 3, that Gibsons are still considered to be better instruments by guitarists and non-musicians alike, Epiphones are considered to be cooler instruments. Why? Well, for starters, because their owners generally don't brag about them nonstop. And given their affordability, you see a lot more cool, young, up-and-coming guitarists playing Epiphones than Gibsons. When I think of Gibsons, I think of guitarists like Jimmy Page, B.B. King, Joe Perry, and Keith Richards. All great guitarists, but also all old enough to be my great-grandfather. And there's nothing cool about being old. Even in the hands of a young guitarist, Gibsons still don't look very cool nowadays. When I see a Gibson Les Paul in the hands of some 15-year-old kid who's only been playing for 15 minutes, I know he didn't pay for it because it would have taken 15 years at his $15 an hour job to be able to afford such an expensive guitar. Which means either his rich parents bought it for him, or, in addition to working the minimum wage job, he's been sucking lots of dicks on the side to supplement his income. Though the latter at least shows initiative, there's really nothing cool about either. Number 6. Anagram. You might not think that it matters what brand has better anagrams, but it totally does. You can learn a lot about a guitar brand by rearranging the letters of its name. For instance, if you want to learn about Gibson owners, rearrange the letters of the word Gibson and you get I Snob G. Or you get the name of Pauly D's snobby little brother, Snobby G. It's no wonder Gibson owners are such snobs. It's built right into the name. But what kind of anagrams can we get from Gibson's big son, Epiphone? Lots. Though many Epiphone models are phony pie versions of Gibson guitars, this brand has better anagrams. Hi, peep on, an Epiphone owner might say as he picks up his instrument. And then there's my personal favorite, Piephone. I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds fucking delicious. You might think I'm crazy when I tell you that anagrams matter. You might be thinking, he on pipe. But they totally do. And if you think that Epiphone wins this category, then bingo. You're right. Number 7, quality. Though nowhere near as important as things like coolness or what anagrams you can make from the name, I should mention that there is a difference in quality between Gibson and Epiphone guitars. The difference in quality is nowhere near as big as the difference in price, but it exists nonetheless. Gibson guitars are made in the good old US of A by unionized, hardworking Americans. Epiphones are made somewhere in Asia by non-unionized children who get paid a fraction of the salary but work just as hard. Whether constructed domestically by workers getting paid $30 an hour or overseas by kids making 30 cents a day, Gibson and Epiphone both produce solid instruments. On the outside, Gibson and Epiphones can look pretty similar, but like they say, it's what's on the inside that counts. Inside a Gibson, you'll find premium hardware and top-of-the-line electronics. Open up an Epiphone, and you'll find budget parts sourced from China. And even though many Gibson and Epiphones may look the same on the outside, they ain't. Gibsons are crafted from only the finest tone woods like mahogany and maple. Epiphones are made out of the bottom of the linest trees in the forest, and in some cases even plywood. Since Epiphone is owned by Gibson and basically exists to produce budget-friendly versions of their guitars, it's no surprise that Gibson wins this category. But the quality of Epiphone guitars has come a long way over the past 20 to 30 years. They now look and feel just like the Gibsons they were modeled after and at a fraction of the price. But how do they sound? Number 8. Sound. To a Gibson owner, no guitar could ever sound as sweet as the sound of their own voice talking about their beloved Gibson. And as they're blabbing about how awesome their guitar is, of course they mention what an amazing tone it has and how great it sounds. The question is, do Gibsons sound better than Epiphones? Well, that depends. In your hands, they both sound pretty shitty. But that's because when it comes to sound, the thing that matters most isn't the guitar. It's the player. An Epiphone in the hands of a skilled guitarist is going to sound 1,000 times better than a Gibson in the hands of someone like, well, you. But if that skilled guitarist was to switch back and forth between playing, say, a Gibson Les Paul and its Epiphone equivalent, since the Gibson's pickups are made from higher quality parts, it's going to sound a little better. That's assuming you can hear the difference at all, which, if you're like most people, you won't be able to. But for musicians with a trained ear, Gibsons are going to sound a little better because they're made from higher quality wood and have better electronics. Of course, that's assuming the Gibson owner can stop talking about it long enough to actually play the thing for a minute. Verdict. So now that we've broken down Gibson and Epiphones into 8 categories, let's see how they stack up. Gibson's won the headstock, perception, quality, and sound categories. Epiphone won the price, owners, coolness, and anagram categories. It's a dead tie, 4-4. So I guess the answer to whether Gibson or Epiphone is better turns out to be neither. Or both. The truth is that Gibson and Epiphone both make quality instruments. Now, Epiphones used to be cheap pieces of shit, but their quality has improved dramatically over the past couple decades. You really can't go wrong with either brand. Which is better totally depends on you. If you're a new guitarist, Epiphone is better. Why? because odds are you're going to give up at some point within your first year of playing, and it's better to only waste a few $100 as opposed to a few thousand. Even if you stick with it, an inexperienced guitarist isn't going to be able to really tell the difference between a Gibson and an Epiphone anyway. So, if you're a new guitarist, or even a seasoned one looking to add a quality instrument to your collection without having to dish out thousands of dollars, Epiphone is better. If you've got shitloads of money laying around and a few grand ain't nothing to you, Gibson is better. They're made in the USA from quality parts, and most importantly, they say Gibson on them. So, in conclusion, if you can afford a Gibson, they're technically better guitars. For the rest of us, the better guitar is the one you can actually afford. But it doesn't really matter whether you own a Gibson or an Epiphone if you can't play this thing. Forget about which brand is better and go practice your instrument. And while you're at it, do yourself another favor. Forget about both Gibson and Epiphone and just go buy yourself a Stratocaster.
You're so annoying.
If you like this shirt, it's available in lots of colors and sizes at MusicBSharp.com, along with lots of other funny music-related merch. Link in the description. If you want access to special episodes of MusicBSharp, like the best music to listen to while high as fuck, visit my Patreon page where you can find exclusive content, get early access to regular videos, and more. Link also in the description. And if you'd like to hear some of my music, click that link in the description, or search for this dude on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you listen to music.